Werner, the official ladder of the NCAA basketball championships and the official ladder of professional contractors everywhere. Werner, #1 in ladders.
Get ready for the latest NFL info you need to know. NFL Insider starts now.
Put down those brackets. You know you're not going to win that thing anyway. Come talk a little football with us. We are NFL Insiders. I'm Dan Graziano here with Ashley Fox and Jim Trotter, and we have a jam-packed half hour of news and information for you. We also have John Clayton, who will be joining us right now with news out of Buffalo today, where tight end Charles Clay will be joining the Buffalo Bills. The Miami Dolphins, who used the transition tag on Clay earlier this month, won't be matching that 5-year, $38 million offer the Bills made to Clay, so he moves on to join Percy Harvin and LaShawn McCoy and all those fun new guys in Buffalo. John Clayton, thanks for joining us. What went into Miami's decision here?
I mean, really, this was no decision, because once they were able to get Jordan Cameron on a 2-year deal at $15 million, there was no way they were going to keep a $7 million transition tag on Clay and then also think that they would have to match it and pay so much money, $20 million guaranteed. I mean, you can only do so much, particularly when you bring in Ndamukong Suh and pay him quarterback money. So this one was really expected. I think the only surprise is the fact the Dolphins didn't wait till Sunday, which would have been the deadline on Sunday night, to try to let them know. They just basically cleared the room, got him out of there. Clay gets a nice deal of $38 million over 5 years to go to Buffalo. You've got Cameron now taking over at tight end. And this frees up some money if they want to try to go out and get a receiver or anything else on the offensive line. So no surprise in this one. This one was basically inevitable.
Clay finished third on the Dolphins last year with 58 catches and 605 receiving yards. John, thanks, and please don't go anywhere. We're going to have a little fun later. Okay. The big story Wednesday was the Dallas Cowboys signing a free agent pass rusher Greg Hardy, a controversial move due to Hardy's involvement in one of the high-profile domestic violence incidents of 2014. The Hardy deal is constructed in a way that protects the Cowboys against a lengthy suspension or a recurrence of off-field trouble for Hardy, but given the details and the nature of Hardy's legal troubles, it raises eyebrows nonetheless. So Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, released a statement yesterday on the signing saying, quote, "We have spent a great deal of time over the last 2 days in meeting with Greg directly and gaining a solid understanding of what he is all about as a person and as a football player. A thorough background review of him involving many elements of our organization has been ongoing for the last few weeks. Our organization understands the very serious nature of domestic violence in our society and in our league. We know that Greg has a firm understanding of those issues as well." So now that Hardy does have a new team, Ashley, what are you hearing about this situation going forward?
Well, I spoke to someone at the league office, and as we would expect, at some point there is going to be a punishment for Greg Hardy, and there's a couple of things at work here. One is that under the new personal conduct policy, that they're not as reliant now on the judicial system to have to make a ruling. Whether you accept that or believe that is the right way to go, they don't have to. The NFL is going to conduct its own internal investigation. They're trying to get some pieces of evidence, and then they're going to make their own decision. And the other thing that I was told was to remember, paid leave is not a punishment in the league's eyes. And so Hardy last year missed almost the entire season on the commissioner's exempt list. Nevertheless, he was paid $13.1 million. That is not a sufficient punishment as far as the league is concerned. They want to make a statement here that now, in the aftermath of the Ray Rice situation, that they are taking this issue seriously. And, it's not going to be a matter of are they going to punish him, but for how long? And I think 6 games is something that's being bannered around, and we'll see. And I think they're going to make it so the NFLPA then has to appeal the decision and make them look like the bad guys as opposed to the league.
Well, it's about time that the league is going to take this seriously, because in the previous 7 years, Roger Goodell basically washed his hands of domestic violence cases. I think the longest suspension was 2 games. So it's about time he got serious about this issue. But the thing is, if you're going to throw the book at him now, then throw it at him. Why are we waiting at this point? Are we waiting for a resolution of the Adrian Peterson case, where the league wants to say that it can discipline him under the new personal conduct policy as opposed to the old one? We don't know at this point. So from my standpoint, look, if you want to be a tough guy on this, throw the book at him now and let's move forward.
Do you think that the league has itself in a difficult position here, given how many of these situations they're dealing with and their ongoing struggle for consistency across the board?
I don't think Roger Goodell cares about consistency. If he cared about consistency, he would deal with the owners the same way he deals with the players. As you know, there are 2 owners right now who have violated his own personal conduct policy. They both, one was convicted of fraud, has not been disciplined. That's Ziggy Wolf. The other one, Jimmy Haslam, was involved in a fraud case and settled it for $92 million. He was not disciplined under the personal conduct policy. So Roger Goodell has no consistency when it comes to this policy other than he's going to come down hard on players.
And he's probably going to come down on Greg Hardy, and at some point, Hardy's suspension will be served, and he will end up on the field for the Dallas Cowboys, who have had a very interesting offseason so far. A lot going on, some comings and goings. Quarterback Tony Romo was a guest on Jimmy Kimmel's show last night, and he was asked about the departure of his teammate DeMarco Murray to the Eagles. Here's Tony.
They asked me if we should do it. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, you have no part as a player. You're just hoping, that, all your teammates can stay for your whole career. And you get close with certain guys. And I was close with DeMarco. And, I remember a month or two before, I'm trying to, you're trying to be like, hey, tell ownership in some ways that you want to keep them. And I'm disappointed we lost him, but we're in the bus in Arizona after the Pro Bowl for the Super Bowl week. And so Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, who are owners of the Dallas Cowboys, and Jason Garrett are there, and a few other people and stuff. And we're talking, and I'm trying to actually push the envelope of keeping DeMarco, and I think everyone wants to do that, and they're just throwing out things. And he'd actually had a few drinks at the time, and so there were some passionate speeches going on about what you wanted to do, and one of them was my own. And I sit there and I looked over at Steven, who's probably going to take over for Jerry one day as the owner, and I said, Steven, you've got 25 to 30 years left to go win championships, and I'm like, I look over at Jason, I'm like, you're the next Tom Landry, you got 25 to 30 years left to go win championships, and I didn't know what I was saying at the time, but I'm like, me and Jerry, we got 4 or 5 years left only. And I was trying to push the envelope we needed to bring DeMarco and everybody back, but I didn't realize I'm basically telling him, you're going to die. That was not my intent.
Fun times on the Cowboys bus. We don't want to go there, but there is some evidence over the past couple years of a shifting dynamic with the Cowboys. Jerry Jones now 72, maybe not wielding quite as heavy a hand as he did once in the day-to-day operations of the team. Son Steven gaining a more prominent role, maybe more influence. There seem to be a few moves that have gone on the last couple of years that indicate this. Jim, does that jive with what you hear out of Dallas?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is now they're not trying to win the press conference, they're trying to win games. So when you look at the moves that they've made in recent years, these are very un-Jerry-like. When you talk about drafting offensive linemen in the first round rather than going after the big name, when you talk about backing away from Johnny Manziel, someone who Jerry has said he liked a lot, when you look at letting, DeMarco walk instead of finding a way to get a deal done for him. In the past, Jerry would have kept all these players, not now.
So, Ashley, is it a case of someone learning his lesson after years of frustration, or just mellowing out with age?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's probably a little bit of truth in both of those things. I mean, I was in Dallas in October and sat with Stephen Jones in his office, and we talked about the whole this whole issue about did they want to get Johnny Manziel? And they'd had a meeting the morning of the draft, and Jerry had said, it's not going to happen. There's no way that he'll fall to us. And lo and behold, he does. And they had a plan in place. And Stephen said, our plan was we're going to stick to drafting these linemen so that we can build the line. And Jerry understood it. But don't think for a second if Jerry wouldn't have said, I want Johnny, that we wouldn't have drafted him. But he stepped back and said, no, Zach Martin's, we're going to stick to our plan. The interesting thing, I think, is that DeMarco Murray was such an important piece of that plan, especially last season, the success that they had keeping the defense off the field, giving Tony Romo more protection and another option, and then to just let him walk in free agency instead of doing what he'd done so often in the past of paying a player. really, you have to wonder if did he miss on that move in particular.
Yeah, and there have been players in the past that were not as good as DeMarco Murray that he stuck with longer than he probably should have. So maybe we are seeing a little bit of a wising up or just a change in philosophy in terms of how the organization might operate. Certainly going 12-4, which was the Cowboys' best record since 2007, that underlines the quality of these moves, these decisions, however they're being made, whoever's making them. You can look at what happened in 2014 if you're the Cowboys and say, that worked, let's stick with it. It was only 25 months ago that the Ravens beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl. You guys remember that? Lights went out. Crazy night. But since then, a lot has been changing for both teams, especially this offseason. 49ers and head coach Jim Harbaugh parted ways, and Ravens offensive coordinator Gary Kubiak was named the head coach in Denver. A lot of players on the move, too. The 49ers notably lost linebackers Patrick Willis and Chris Borland to retirement, Frank Gore to free agency, while the Ravens lost Torrey Smith to San Francisco and traded Haloti Ngata to Detroit. Baltimore also made headlines yesterday by releasing running back Bernard Pierce, the third player they released following an arrest this offseason. 49ers had released Ray McDonald back in December, so just 14 of the 44 starters from Super Bowl 47 are still with their teams, including only 5 on the Ravens side. Torrey Smith and Anquan Boldin are now in San Francisco, meaning the 49ers have almost as many Ravens offensive starters from that game as Baltimore does. So tons of questions surrounding the 49ers as they head into 2015 with a new and very untested head coach trying to piece things together around all these personnel losses. Jim, what are you hearing? What's the vibe out there in San Francisco about their chances?
Oh, there's no question they're feeling it right now because it's been one hit after another this offseason. But the thing that's interesting to me is how some have tried to characterize it as players wanting to leave the organization because there's this dysfunction now, which isn't the case at all. If you go back and you look at it player by player, all of the moves speak for themselves. Let's take, for instance, Frank Gore. He wanted to return to San Francisco. They didn't make him an offer as much as the Colts did, so he went to Indianapolis. Patrick Willis decides to retire because he's got a bad foot and he has a passion for working with youth. That has nothing to do with the organization. Michael Crabtree wanted to go back. They didn't offer him a contract that he wanted. Now he's on the street. Justin Smith may retire. Ray McDonald, we know about his legal troubles, so the team decided they didn't want to deal with him. So when you go down the list and you get to Borland, he made a personal decision about his future health. It had nothing to do with what was going on in the organization. It's just a matter now in the NFL, change is going to occur.
But the end result is a lot of change.
Absolutely.
And a brand new head coach, Jim Tomsula, who's never done this before. How confident are they that he can bring it all together?
They're very confident in Jim Tomsula. And if you talk to players who have played for Tomsula, they like him and respect him, and they believe that he will get the best out of them. The other thing not to be forgotten is they have a very experienced staff now when you go down the list, offensively and defensively, so it's not all going to be on one guy. And as you know, in the NFL, the head coach is as much a manager as he is a strategist. So from that standpoint, they've got guys in place, coordinators who can handle, they believe, the job, and Tomsula will manage it.
As for the Baltimore Ravens, they are one of the more stable franchises. They always seem to find ways to recover and remain competitive. So, Ashley, what are you hearing about what's going on in Baltimore following their offseason of change?
Well, as you mentioned, they have 5 players left from the Super Bowl team, which it's amazing given the amount of turnover that they've had, that they still, over the past 2-year period, have there's only 6 teams in the conference that have a better record than they do. And they have the 3rd best record in their division, although it's not that far. The Ravens are 18-14, Pittsburgh's 19-13, the Bengals are 21-10-1. The thing when you talk about the Ravens is their utmost belief in Ozzie Newsome. You always hear, in Ozzie we trust. And they have constantly been able to reload through the draft and taking, a couple of free agents here and there. And they believe that they're able to do that again. And the other thing that is, I think, vitally important is that they have the number 1 position on the roster solidified and is, the one constant through that. That's Joe Flacco, of course. And it's interesting that this year Flacco is going to have his 4th offensive coordinator in 4 years. They're moving from Gary Kubiak, who obviously now is in Denver, to Mark Trestman, who had been in Chicago. And Flacco has had a really good relationship with all of these guys, particularly Jim Caldwell and Kubiak, and it's going to be vitally important that he and Trestman get on the same page early and stay there through the season.
Those two teams, Baltimore and San Francisco, will play each other this season in San Francisco. A well-respected NFL insider, but also a cultural phenomenon. He is the one and only John Clayton. John, my favorite thing is that you went full wind-up there in the first pitch. Was that always going to be the way?
That was always going to be the way, yeah. My problem was I didn't practice off a mound, so when I was coming down,
yes.
That's why I was a little bit short of the plate. But next time, I'll be ready.
Next time. It's always important to learn. So, hey, we have, some of our viewers are a little worried about their teams. Maybe in some cases there's a move their team has made, or maybe a move their team hasn't made that has them a little maybe distraught about things here early in the offseason. So on Facebook, we took a few Dear John Clayton letters from fans, and we're hoping that you can give them some reason to hope. Are you up for that?
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Clearly, John is up for whatever, as we've seen. Question from Finura Yo. Dear John, why haven't the Lions made any moves to be a better team? Why didn't they franchise Sue and trade him? Wouldn't that have been better?
No, there was no way you can trade a $27 million franchise number. That simply couldn't happen. And so what they had to try to do, they were lucky enough to get the Haloti Ngata trade. Then they were able to at least get Rasheem Mathis done. Everything right now is keeping the Lions together.
Dennis Clark would like to know, Dear John, why didn't the Broncos do anything in free agency except lose great players? Peyton needs his next
they had
ring.
Demarius Thomas. He was the key to the offseason, and being able to keep him cost them Julius Thomas. It cost them Orlando Franklin. It cost them other players that they wanted to try to do. So now they have to try to get them back at minimal numbers as far as trying to re-sign. Remember last year, they got 4 Pro Bowlers in free agency. They couldn't do that this year. That was something that was just out of the question. They had to try to at least stay calm.
Sometimes fans do forget about the great players that were kept. Question from Adam Warren. Dear John, what is the primary reason high-end free agents don't seem to want to sign with the Raiders, who are turning the corner?
Well, because, it's not the number one choice because they've been so bad for so long. And so, for example, if you're Ndamukong Suh, you'd rather go with the Miami Dolphins than the Oakland Raiders. And so if you're the Raiders, you have to overpay to try to get guys to come there. But unfortunately, it's not as pretty as they thought it was going to be.
And Rob Darmetko wants to know, Dear John, what is the Washington football team going to do at quarterback?
Well, Jay Gruden made that pretty clear at the Combine. Then RG3 is going to be the starter. Colt McCoy is going to be an option if that doesn't work out. And they also have Kirk Cousins. But I'll tell you the one thing. If indeed a quarterback falls from the top of the draft, let's say Marcus Mariota, I'm telling you right now, they would take him at 5. It would be a gift. They're not going to give up that gift.
And they did re-sign Colt McCoy, as you mentioned. He was the only Washington quarterback to start and win a game last season. So maybe that's a silver lining. Thanks, John. Good job.
Thanks, Dan.
Back to football and our NFL Insider's Notebook. Ashley, what's the buzz on Baylor quarterback Bryce Petty?
Well, Bryce Petty had his pro day yesterday. He completed 69 of 77 passes with 5 drops. 42% of those 77 passes went 21 yards or more, and more than half of his passes came off of a 7-step drop or play action. I spoke with his quarterback coach, George Whitfield. He said all of that was on purpose to show scouts that Petty can do more than just work out of the shotgun. And as a result, Petty has 3 visits already on the books scheduled coming up. One is Dallas, one is Philadelphia, and one is San Diego.
Jim, what's going on in San Diego with Phillip Rivers?
Well, right now it's a standoff. They want to get him signed to a long-term extension, but Phillip at this point has not shown any desire to do that. Part of that has to do with clarity. He wants to know where the organization or where the franchise is going to be located. We know we've heard about them going to L.A. And he also wants some clarity on what's going on with the roster. He's never been to a Super Bowl. He wants to win. The 2 quarterbacks taken in the first round in his draft, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, both have won 2 each. At this point, he wants some clarity.
Rivers entering the final year of his deal, and so is Manning. I thought, personally, they'd be working on a contract extension by now. Thought they might do it last year, but the more you hear from the Giants, the less inclined they sound to do this deal now. Everything I've been told is, well, Manning's not going to cut them a deal, so the only reason to do it right now would be cap space, and they don't really need cap space, and they could franchise him next year, and they're not really worried about losing him, so not a lot of movement, somewhat surprisingly, on the Eli Manning contract extension front.
No, and the thing that's interesting, too, with Rivers is he's a guy of conviction, and he's not going to be driven by money here, and he's a guy who will play hardball. So the Chargers, I know, want to get it done, but people who think this is some sort of bluff with him, It's not. He says what he means, and he means what he says.
I think fascinating to think what Rivers or Manning could get on the open market.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.